What's going on? Welcome into Empty the Notebook, the show where we take you on the sidelines into the production meetings and give you behind the scenes view of what's going on with teams as we make this playoff push. A really busy week 11. Evan Washburn with you, soon to be joined by Aditi Kinkhabwala, where each week on Mondays we will do our best to give you a window into our world, but also, most importantly, give you the context you need on some of the biggest games and biggest results. And there is Aditi Kinkhabwala joining us. And Aditi, last week you were making the trek from Arizona back to the East Coast, and it was a long ride. And now it's just Nashville to Pittsburgh, but still a little urgency to get here on a Monday.
Well, because it was a late flight. You know what, Evan, I have to be honest with you. I have no idea if you can see me or hear me. Can you?
I can see you.
We're
We've
having
got some pixelation, but the audio is there. And most importantly, I'm sure we'll be able to clean it up and get the content we need out of you, because you're always full of it.
Oh, I so appreciate that. But hey, pixelation may be a better look after a midnight arrival. It might be doing me some favors. It might be a new filter.
Part of this show too is not necessarily following the biggest game or the biggest, most obvious storyline. It's our hope to give you the most information and really paint the picture of some of the stories that we learned over the weekend and over the course of our season covering the teams in this league. And I was in Pittsburgh for that traditional Steelers-Ravens rivalry that had all of the buildup, the drama that you hope, but also this thought that it would be more of an offensive game. Well, that wasn't the case. It was about as old school as it gets. Obviously, the Steelers getting that 18-16 win. Aditi was in Tennessee for the Vikings and Titans game, and we'll get to her thoughts on what she saw. And one theme that we both, as we were talking about the weekend late into the night last night, that we felt in both of our matchups, but you're starting to see sprinkled around the league. And that was the impact that coordinators, first-year coordinators, are having with some of these teams, and former head coaches. For Aditi's matchup in Tennessee, Brian Flores making a huge impact with the defense there with the Vikings. And then in Pittsburgh yesterday, and really over the last 5 weeks and 4 games since Russell Wilson has taken over, I think the move to make Arthur Smith the offensive coordinator in the offseason by Mike Tomlin has really proven to be an effective and important decision, because what he's brought, not just in his acumen and his system, but is with Russell Wilson, this really perfect marriage of scheme, but also personality. And I thought Arthur lent some words to this throughout the week and lead up to that Ravens game yesterday about how they spend their Friday nights and how they're working late into the night. And he's getting FaceTimes from his wife, wondering where he is. And he's sitting in that room going over the play sheet with Russell Wilson. And having the Steelers in back-to-back weeks from our position is really helpful to kind of dive even deeper into some of these relationships. And one of the things that you hear from Russell Wilson and Mike Tomlin about what Arthur has brought, it's this openness to what it is everyone does well, but also the fact that he is able to have those conversations with Russell Wilson. It's collaborative, and that's something you're starting to see. And I think as you look at this list of some of the things that Russell's done in short order here, he's given the Pittsburgh Steelers back that confidence they had with Ben Roethlisberger. Now, it does seem funny to have this conversation coming off a game where they didn't score a touchdown, to be maybe highlighting the quarterback or the coordinator. But I do think that there were times in that game, and that's the most challenging game, in my opinion, for a quarterback and coordinator to go up against a Ravens team because of that familiarity. And there were moments where there were slight adjustments made. And again, it speaks to their development, the lack of panic. You saw that the week before against the Commanders as well, where they were down in the second half. They made some adjustments. And I just think that relationship, as much as it was Mike Tomlin's call, and he deserves all the credit to go to Russell Wilson after the start from Justin Fields, I think the Arthur Smith, Russell Wilson, that bond, that growing, working relationship is going to be the key for this team if they want to take that next step, because they know they have that defense. That hasn't been an issue for this team, but now it seems like they have the perfect group there running that offense, and that's going to be extremely important. We're going to take a short time out, and hopefully Aditi Kinkhabwala can join us when we come back to discuss some of the things she saw in her matchup in Tennessee, the Vikings picking up the win. Welcome back into Empty the Notebook. FM Washburn alongside Aditi Kinkhabwala. And Aditi, we had some technical difficulties in segment one, so I rambled for a bit there about Arthur Smith and Russell Wilson. And I think there's some key points to be made, but I know this is something that you've been able to witness, being a part of that market, knowing that team as well as you do. And it really kind of marries nicely to something you experienced in your game in Tennessee as well.
Well, absolutely. But let's just say it wasn't rambling. You made some very key points. And I've said over and over again that I think the biggest addition to the Steelers offense is actually Arthur Smith. It also speaks so highly of Mike Tomlin, who has had former head coaches on his staff before, Todd Haley, Dick LeBeau, Mike Munchak. He likes smart minds, and he went out and he got a guy that had been in the seat before in Arthur Smith. He got a guy that really believes in his philosophy on offense. And it's the first time really since Todd Haley has been running the offense that the Steelers are doing what they want to do. Here's the little connective tissue. Mike Tomlin also brought in another former head coach after he was let go 3 years ago, and that was Brian Flores. Brian Flores spent a year as a senior defensive assistant with Mike Tomlin. Then he has now spent 2 years with the Minnesota Vikings as the defensive coordinator. And I'll tell you, Evan, Brian is a little further along in this process than Arthur Smith. He's 3 years removed from having been a head coach, but you can absolutely tangibly feel how hungry he is to be a head coach again, not simply because of ego and wanting to be in that seat, but because of how much he has learned, how much he has taken from both Mike Tomlin and from Kevin O'Connell. And you can feel that he really believes he can do the job so much better than when he had the chance the first time. Evan, he was so specific with us. He said from Mike Tomlin, he really learned what it means to be the CEO of an organization. That even though Tomlin is known as being a defensive coach, if you're inside that building, you don't just coach the defense. You don't just coach the offense. You don't just coach the special teams. He said Mike Tomlin goes so out of his way to have a relationship with every player in that building. And that's something that he'll take with him in the next stop. And then Kevin O'Connell, he talks to us at length about the relationship between a quarterback and a head coach. And we all know about how things went with him and Tua. And what he said to us is now he realizes how paramount that relationship is. So look, Brian Flores' players are playing so hard for him. You don't play in that complicated of a defense that requires so much thinking and features so many disguises if you don't buy in. You don't play as hard as you do if you don't believe in the guy who's doing it. And to Brian Flores' credit, he has very clearly acknowledged where he could be better and do better. And I'll just say on a personal level, Evan, I hope he gets another chance because experience sometimes is the greatest teacher that there is.
No, well said. I couldn't agree with you more. Brian Flores seems primed to really seize that next opportunity. And look, we know this. There's going to be some opportunities coming up here in a few months, and we might dive into one of those opportunities as we wrap up the show. But as we now move on from our lead into what is the heart and soul of this show, Aditi, it's emptying the notebook. And the thought behind this is there's so much that happens over the course of a game. There's so much work that's done in lead up, but the game always takes us where the game wants. And that means a lot will be left on the cutting room floor, if you will. So this is our opportunity to maybe give a story, a nugget, a piece of information, part of a conversation that wasn't really highlighted in our broadcast. I'll go first, again, going back to the Steelers Ravens game that you've lived and breathed for so many years covering this league. And it was one of those things, Aditi, where in lead up, and I know you were hearing it all, was, this is going to be different this year. Both offenses, Baltimore's number one in the NFL. The Steelers have something with Russ, a little bit more dynamic. It was not. It was a punt fest, and it was special teams, turnovers, physical play, and penalties. But it still had the tension that you love. But one thing that came up in our meeting with Mike Tomlin, and we've met with him a bunch in back-to-back weeks now doing the Commanders game, with the Patrick Queen revenge game, if you will, that was a big storyline. And we touched on that. We hit that. But it actually led to something Mike Tomlin kind of opened us up to, was his philosophy on both free agency, but the draft, and just how much he values youth. And it was a reminder to me, Patrick Queen's only 25 years old. He played 4 years in Baltimore. Baltimore. He's on his second contract, which is always that main goal for a player. But Mike Tomlin recognized not just the value of him as a player and thinking he could be the quarterback of their defense, which he's done effectively and did so yesterday, a forced fumble leading the team in tackles, but also that he's only 25. Like, they have a runway with him. And Mike Tomlin, you know this, Aditi, just loves the opportunity to develop players. And I think it also means he takes some chances on some young guys. George Pickens comes to mind, only 23 years old. They had him when he was 20 there in the building. But then you sprinkle around the roster. This is a young man's league. Nick Herbig, big game yesterday. He's just 22 years old. Zach Frazier, their center that appears to be a foundational piece, just 23 years old. And again, it goes back to what Tomlin told us about young players. He's like, I want to be a part of that development, that growth. I'll take the bumps along the way with a young guy because he sees the reward in being able to have them young and work up with them. So again, it's nothing sort of out of this world in terms of thinking, whether it be from a front office or head coach, but it does speak to some of the decisions they make there in Pittsburgh.
Well, Evan, and I'll give a little extra piece to that. A lot of that has to do with general manager Omar Khan, too, because the Steelers historically, when they sign other people's players, free agents, they're guys that are a little bit past their prime, like a Joe Hayden. This, for the first time this year, in bringing in Patrick Queen, Deshaun Elliott, J.C. Jackson, bringing in younger free agents who've still got a lot of ball left in them. And that's a key sort of departure from the way business was done before. And yes, you are right. It's so funny. Yesterday, Ramon Foster, who was a stalwart left guard for the Steelers for over a decade, he's now the Titans radio sideline guy. And I walked by him on the sideline at one point yesterday, and he was looking at his phone, and the score was 15-10. And I said to him, is that not a Steelers-Ravens score? And speaking of animosity, Anthony Levine, you certainly remember Anthony Levine. He was a special teams icon for the Ravens for a long time. He's now working with the special teams in Tennessee. Pre-game, Ramon and I were next to each other. Anthony walks by. He gives me a hug. He says hi to Ramon. And I said, are you guys friends? And Anthony said, not today, we're not. So when you've got Steelers-Ravens rivalry in your blood, it doesn't leave. For my end, I would have loved yesterday to have talked about the Titans. And look, the Titans are sitting at 2-7. Actually, now they're sitting at 2-8. And a head coach can never publicly talk about moral victories. A head coach can only acknowledge the tangible, which are wins and losses. But when you talk to Brian Callahan, you really feel that he senses that foundationally things are going in the right direction, that there are indeed things inside that building that he can feel good about. And now look, he can't get on a podium. He can't sit here and say our punt team, which has had these issues, or our punt coverage team is actually so much better, or Will Levis not turning the ball over once against the Chargers is in fact a big deal, even though we lost the game. Those aren't things that are going to fly in a press conference setting. But when you're around the Titans and you watch practice, as we have now a couple times, these aren't guys that have stopped fighting. And when I was standing on the sideline yesterday, even when it was early in the game and it looked like the Vikings were running away with things, there was no quit on that sideline. There was no hanging of the heads. There was the fire and the passion that you expect to see from a quarterback to his offensive line, from Jeffrey Simmons, who's standing and playing head cheerleader when the offense is on the field. This is a team that truly has indeed bought into what Brian Callahan is selling. But the difficulty, Evan, is how do you quantify things for your team? How do you make them feel good about things when there isn't actually tangible things? And externally, there's that beatdown. You know, these guys hear what the media is saying. They see what's on social media. I mean, Brian Callahan's own kids are hearing it. We talked about that. So it was a very interesting insight, Evan, into how a head coach has to stomach his own disappointment, right? Because nobody becomes a head coach to start 2-8, keeps his team fighting and battling, and makes his team feel good about things while also holding them accountable to what's not yet good enough. And it was great how Brian Callahan let us in on that. And I wish I could somehow convince Titans fans things are indeed on the right path. Remember the Lions. They didn't look so good at one point, and look at where they are now.
No, it's a great point. And it's the hardest part of the year for that storyline because fans don't want to hear it as we get set for week 12 in the NFL. Coming up next, though, it might be time to throw some flags, Aditi. Get your set. We'll be right back.
I got mine.
Back into Empty the Notebook. Evan Washburn alongside Aditi Kinkhabwala. This is a staple of the show. We're only in our second week, but I think it's still a staple. Aditi, it's time to possibly throw some flags. I'm really excited that we had the budget for these because now my kid's running around with them as well. But the way this works, back and forth, making a statement, and we'll decide if we're throwing the flag. So we each get a statement or something to say we throw the penalty flag on or not if we do agree with that statement. So I'll present you with the first statement, and that off of Sunday night, the win over the Bengals, and really what you've seen up to this point, Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert are a duo and really a team, if you will, to be worried about, and they're going to have to contend with down the stretch here and into the playoffs.
The flag is absolutely going back in the belt. I am not disagreeing with that in any way. Look, Chris Collinsworth said it last night on the broadcast, and Jim Harbaugh had actually said it to us a few weeks ago when we had the Chargers. Jim Harbaugh said to us, God willing, Justin Herbert will be the last quarterback that he ever coaches. He is fully expecting to ride out his career.
The level of love is unmatched in the NFL.
Look, Justin Herbert is playing so well. Jim Harbaugh is relating to him in a way that Justin Herbert told us he's never had. We know the coach that Jim Harbaugh is. We know that staff that he has assembled. What is Jesse Minter doing with that defense? The way these Chargers are playing. I love what they're doing. I think Jim Harbaugh is a phenomenal coach. I think Justin Herbert is one of those elite talents who his teammates love and is only going to get better under the tutelage of Jim Harbaugh. I completely agree. Swallow your flags.
No flags on the field. All right. What are you presenting with me? I get to be Gene Steratore on this one.
All right. For you, Mr. Washburn, no matter what the Bills say, that was 100% absolutely a statement win over the Kansas City Chiefs yesterday afternoon on CBS.
No laundry once again. This is a clean game, efficient in week 11 or 12, however you want to frame it. I thought Von Miller, Aditi, put it perfectly. I get why Sean McDermott and even Josh Allen, both in lead up to this game and after this game, not wanting to make more of it. And they're both right in the sort of pragmatic nature of things, where it doesn't mean anything more than any other game on the standings and on the record books. But what they did yesterday afternoon and into the evening was impressive because of not only who they played, but what they were bringing to the game. This is Bills version 2.0, but this wasn't even that. They didn't have Dalton Kincaid. They didn't have Keon Coleman. They were missing Spencer Brown on that offensive line. And they not only went toe-to-toe with the Chiefs, but they won in declarative fashion down the stretch. And Josh Allen looked every part of the MVP that appears to be going back and forth with Lamar week to week. So this was absolutely a statement win. And I thought, again, Von Miller kind of making the joke after the locker room speech, like, no, absolutely not. This was a game that meant a little bit more. Now, they're going to probably, I would agree with everybody, Tony, Tracy, Jim mentioning it on the broadcast, they're going to probably have to do this again. I think even Patrick may have said that at the handshake after the game. We'll see a little bit later. And I do believe that's true. But I think what happened yesterday afternoon is significant to continue to prove that the decisions made in the offseason, Stephon Diggs, some of the roster movement they needed to make based off of the salary cap, has proven to provide not just a quality team, but one that can do everything this team wants to do and has been trying to do for a number of years.
But Evan, I'll tell you, you know what? This statement is not only externally, it's the statement to the team internally. I was on the sideline for that playoff game last year between the Chiefs and the Bills. And in the fourth quarter, the Bills were up, but you could sense a completely different attitude on both sidelines. The Chiefs settled in. The feeling was, all right, we've got them right where we want them, because they'd been there before. They'd done this before. The Bills sideline, meanwhile, got tenser. You could see the coaches on their headsets talking a lot more quickly. There was a more frenetic, nervous energy on the Bills sideline, because guess what? They hadn't ever done it. But now, yesterday, they did do it. They did indeed pull away from the Chiefs when they had a chance to. They did indeed get a big win. And so who cares what the statement is to the media or to the fans? The statement inside the locker room to themselves is what's going to matter come January.
All right, we're up against it, Aditi, but I want to give you a chance to maybe throw a flag, or maybe I'll throw one late here. If Doug Peterson is to be removed from the head coaching position in Jacksonville, whether it's in season or after season, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of reporting around this. Bill Belichick would be a good fit in Jacksonville. You throwing the flag or no?
I need further information. Is Trent Baalke still the GM? Because if Trent Baalke is still the GM, then I am throwing the flag. I do not see the two of them working together.
I love the fit, to be honest with you. I think it could make a lot of sense. Obviously, Doug Peterson's still in control there as we have this show, but it's as intriguing a storyline as there is, and that'll only heat up here as we move down the stretch. Aditi, we're in week 2. We're making our way through this thing. It's a lot of fun. Great work, and we'll catch up next week after week 12 in the NFL. If you missed any of this, you can catch up on episodes late on our YouTube channel, NFL on CBS, and we'll see you on the sideline this Sunday.